Okay, welcome. Welcome. My name is Lisa. Welcome to Mystically Soul. Today we are going to be talking about. Oh, sorry, I'm still getting set up a little bit. Mercury's in retrograde, so it is the time to be ill prepared, I guess. Yes, so today we are here to talk about how to minimize challenging behaviors with your children and teenagers. So, a little bit about me before we get started. Um, I am a mother of two teenagers. So, I have a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old, and I've learned tons from them. But I do have a background in child development and child psychology. So I, worked as a research assistant out of college on a child development study, learning about parent-child interaction. And then from there, I worked, let's see, what did I do? Oh, okay. So from there, I actually had my first child, and then I was working part time at a. Oh, okay, yeah. I'm like, where did I even work? Okay, so I worked at a children's hospital, doing like paperwork and secretarial work. But from there, I Oh, yeah, went on to be a life skills coach. I had my second child. Oh, and as a life skills coach, I was working with individuals on the autism spectrum who were a little higher functioning, verbal and that kind of thing, but needed assistance with, social skills and executive function skills and that kind of thing. And from there, I decided that I wanted to kind of continue working with that population. Um, so I went on to work at an ABA agency where I worked in home, at schools, and like within the agency in the program that they had there, working as a one-to-one aide for individuals with autism, helping them, with, whatever their goals were. Okay. Whatever the goals that the BCBA had established. So from there, I decided I wanted to be a BCBA and actually create the programming and supervise therapists in implementing the programming. So I went back to school and got my degree to do that. And I started working as a BCBA. I worked for a corporation for several years and implemented programming, did parent training, parent education, that kind of thing. And in 2020, I decided to leave the corporation and, go off on my own. And so here I am. So that is my story in brief. And I wanted to, share what I know, some of what I've learned along the way professionally, as well as in my own personal life, and, bring it to you guys. So here we are. So let's get into it. So the first thing that you want to think about when you're dealing with challenging behaviors, and this is from an applied behavior analytics standpoint, is understanding like what is the function of the behavior? Why is the behavior happening? Okay, so what is the child trying to achieve by engaging in the behavior? Okay, this is really important. And sometimes it's more than just one thing, right? Sometimes it's, they're trying to escape feeling bad, so they're trying to get access to something that's going to make them feel better. And a lot of times that's kind of the situation with a lot of with everybody, not just children or, people with disabilities and that kind of thing. Um, so yeah, the functions of behavior. So if you're not familiar with what are the functions of behavior, there is attention. Okay, so a lot of times, behaviors will occur, challenging behaviors will occur because the person is trying to get attention. Okay, sometimes these aren't necessarily challenging behaviors. They're more just attention seeking behaviors. They may be more inappropriate or odd or annoying, right? So sometimes attention seeking behaviors aren't necessarily a problem in that, they're not hurting anybody, but they're just more like not really functional. They're not really um, necessarily like the best way to go about getting attention. So you might want to like shape an inappropriate or an odd attention seeking behavior to be something that is more constructive, right? Or, is just a better way to get attention. So, for example, if you have a child in a classroom, let's say you have a child in like, you know, third grade, okay, let's say, and the child is, blurting out inappropriate comments, teasing other kids, and you notice that each time they do engage in these behaviors, other kids laugh. Okay. So maybe after doing like a little kind of functional assessment, even through observation, you determine that the behavior is controlled by attention. The child is seeking attention. So, instead of, you know, moving the kid, to the back of the classroom or moving the kid out of the classroom or giving him detention, you know, you could find better ways for the child to get attention. So maybe, setting up a time where he can kind of like deliver jokes, like, be like a comedian, right? Or have like, you know, each time the child is able to kind of get through a part of the day without interrupting, you know, they get a star at the end of the week. If they get a certain amount of stars, they can kind of get up and do do their stand-up routine for the classroom. Okay, so this would be a way to shape, let's say, a child who has attention seeking behaviors. Okay, um right, so that's attention seeking. um Yeah. And how you would identify if a behavior is attention seeking is by doing the ABC data. Okay. So there's antecedent, what comes before the behavior itself, which in this case would have been inappropriate comments, blurting things out in class, and then the consequence of the behavior, which would be, let's say, even the teacher saying, oh, Xavier, quiet down, that's attention, or kids laughing, that's attention, right? So that's kind of how you would determine that the behavior is attention seeking. Another possible function of behavior is access to tangibles. Okay, so sometimes, children will engage in challenging behaviors because they're trying to get access to something. Um, they're trying to get access to candy. They're trying to get access to their device. Let's say, what would be an example for access to tangibles? Okay, Xavier is now at the grocery store with his mom. And, this is more typical of younger children because typically older children, if they're verbal and that they're at like a certain level of development cognitively, they're able to be rule governed. So you would be able to say like, okay, so like when we're all done grocery shopping, you can pick something out and then you can have that in the car ride home, right? So they're rule governed, so typically you'll see a challenging behavior at the grocery store with a child who isn't able to be rule governed. Let's say you have a very young child, 4 or 5 years old, and they want something at the grocery store, like candy, and you're like, no, we're not getting candy right now, and they have a temper tantrum. Okay, so they're having a temper tantrum because they want access to the candy. How do you deal with problem behavior that has to do with access? Well, first of all, again, determine that that's the function of the behavior. Now, if you give the child the access after they've engaged in the challenging behavior, let's say the temper tantrum, that is your way of saying, okay, so when you engage in a tantrum, you will get what you want. Okay, so let's say first they ask, I want candy, and you said no. And then they say it louder, I want candy. You say no. Then they engage in the temper tantrum. And let's say because you don't want to be embarrassed at the grocery store, you give them the candy. You're really telling them when you engage in temper tantrums, that is a great way to get what you want. Okay, so really what you don't want to do is give them the thing after they have engaged in the temper tantrum. Okay, so if there's any chance at all that you can let them know, like, okay, so first we go grocery shopping and then you can get the candy, or you could anticipate that they're going to want candy, so maybe show them before you go to the grocery store, like, okay, so we have some candy, when after we go grocery shopping you can get the candy, right? So then they're not motivated to even get candy at the grocery store. They already know they're going to be getting candy after they go to the grocery store, right? So it's important that you don't kind of give in to the temper tantrum. But we'll kind of go into some antecedent modifications a little bit more, but we're going to continue with functions of behavior. Okay, so another function of behavior is escape and avoidance. All right, so let's say let's use the example of Xavier again. Poor Xavier is having a hard time, right? He's in class, and every time you give a math assignment or every time you give a math worksheet, Xavier engages in challenging behaviors. Okay, let's say that's when he engages in the blurting out, making jokes, being disruptive. So at this point, you've determined that, okay, so it has an attention component, but also every time I give him the math worksheet, he engages in this challenging behavior, and I have to send him out of the classroom to the principal's office. But what is really happening here? He is escaping the task, right? He gets out of doing the math worksheet. So after this occurs, let's say 5 or 6 times, he's had to be sent out of the classroom, and you realize like you don't have any math worksheets from Xavier. He's successfully escaped and avoided doing the math worksheet. So you are essentially telling him, okay, so when you engage in that challenging behavior, you don't actually have to do the math worksheet. And this is a good way. You're communicating to him that this is a good way to get out of doing the math worksheet. So at this point, and again, we'll get into what modifications that you can make, but you could modify the worksheet, right? For Xavier, you could, let's say, fold the sheet of paper so that maybe he only has to do half of the math worksheet. You could actually identify where he has issues and maybe offer some extra help after class or before class. You could determine if there is some other kind of like learning challenge, that's producing difficulty with completing kind of the math problems. Okay. But again, it's important to know like why the behavior is happening, because if you try to solve the problem, like, oh, okay, I'm going to send him out of the classroom, so he's not going to be disruptive. But that's not going to minimize the challenging behavior. He will continue the challenging behavior because he is escaping. That's the function of the behavior. That's why the behavior is happening. Okay. Okay, so let's see. We talked about attention. We talked about access. We talked about escape. Then there is automatic reinforcement or sensory. Okay, so sometimes behaviors occur because the person is getting some reinforcement internally from engaging in the behavior. Okay, so this is more like you would say, sometimes I guess they call it stimming behaviors, behaviors that are self-stimulatory. Oftentimes there is a sensory component that, the person wants to feel. So for example, chewing on inedible objects, even like, okay, like my pen. My pen is chewed. And that is an example of automatic reinforcement. Now, like when people kind of like shake their leg, you know what I mean? Like they shake their leg like that. I'm shaking my leg, but you can't see me shaking my leg. That's an example of a behavior that occurs because it's automatically reinforcing. So, when you're thinking about addressing a behavior and you want to reduce it, let's say you want to minimize this behavior, you need to think, is it, what is it a priority? Is it a priority to reduce? And there, I'll probably do a video on, picking behaviors. Like, how do you pick a behavior? Like, how do you decide if you want to reduce a behavior? And does it require intervention? Okay, because not all behaviors necessarily require intervention. So, for example, a lot of people drink alcohol or smoke cannabis. Now, does everybody need to go into intervention? Does everybody need to go to Alcoholics Anonymous? Does everybody need to go to like drug rehab because they engage in these behaviors? No, not necessarily. A lot of people just do these things recreationally after work and to relax, and it doesn't require intervention. Okay. Something requires intervention when it is impeding on their ability to engage in the daily tasks that they need to do in order to, like, be a member of society that kind of contributes in some kind of way, or if the behavior is impeding on their ability to engage in their daily tasks, then that's when you may say it requires intervention. Okay, so for me chewing on my pen, honestly, I don't even remember when I did this. But I don't often chew on pens. Maybe this wasn't even me. I'm not even sure who did this. I just saw that it was a pen that was chewed, and I'm like, okay, let me use this as an example. Um, it's not. It doesn't require intervention. I don't do it like if it was happening so much that, like, let's say my teeth were getting messed up. People who have teeth grinding and they're grinding down their teeth, that requires, right, intervention. But if you're doing it to an extent where it doesn't really happen that often, it's not really disturbing anybody, then maybe you can kind of just let it be. So again, with the behaviors that are controlled by sensory stimulation, they may not require intervention. Again, you have to look at, like, sometimes self-injurious behaviors, like, hitting yourself, or skin picking. Sometimes these behaviors can occur to such an extent that the person hurts themselves, and it absolutely requires intervention. Okay, so you really have to look at this on a case by case basis, and it's really something that you know you need to kind of like not come from a place of like, oh, I don't like this behavior, it annoys me, and so I want to intervene on it. If it's something like, that doesn't really hurt the person, right? Whereas if it is very disruptive, if it is occurring a lot where it's impeding on their everyday tasks, it may require intervention. Okay, so we're going to kind of get into, you know, what we do in behavior analysis to minimize a challenging behavior. Okay. And, these are things that I implement in my everyday life. Okay. With my own family, with my own children. Um, so we have antecedent modifications. We have teaching replacement behaviors, and we have consequence modifications. Okay. So remember when we did the ABC, I mentioned the ABC, the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. So when you're determining the function, you want to look at what comes before the behavior, what comes after the behavior, and that's how you're able to determine, like, what are the controlling, what's the function, what are the controlling variables. And that way you can also make your antecedent and your consequence modifications. You can also determine what might be a replacement behavior that will match the function. Okay, so in the example of attention, we talked about the replacement behavior being, that he can tell jokes in front of the class rather than being disruptive in the middle of a lesson. Okay, so in this case, an antecedent modification could be, let's say, some sort of token system. Like I said, getting a sticker. So, let's say he's in third grade, he has math, science, English, and social studies. Okay. So each lesson, let's say he gets a sticker. Okay, so you didn't disrupt during math. Awesome, you get a sticker. You didn't disrupt during English. Awesome, you get a sticker. So let's say, at the end of the day, he gets all of his stickers. Let's say he gets to go up at the end of the class, at the end of the day, and he gets to tell one joke. Okay. So before I said like maybe the end of the week, but maybe going through a whole entire week, that might be too much. Let's say he wants attention every single day, right? You also want to think about um, matching the reinforcement at the same rate that he's getting the behavior and that he's getting the consequence that he wants. Like he's getting the attention that he wants every day. So your reinforcement should really match that. So, for example, if he's engaging in the challenging behaviors every day to get attention every day, giving him the opportunity to tell jokes at the end of the week, that might be too much space between him engaging in the correct behavior and then him getting reinforcement for the behavior. So you may have to, start with allowing him or giving him access to reinforcement every day. So like at the end of the day, he gets to kind of tell a joke or some type of attention. Maybe you know he can get you know a few kids in the class to sit down and have like a conversation club or something like that. Whatever it may be. But like, again, it's important that the replacement behavior sort of match what the problem behavior's function is. Okay. So if the function is attention, giving him access, let's say, oh, if you're not disruptive in class, you can get a sticker and then I'll show your mom that you got these stickers and she'll give you your tablet. That's getting access to a tangible. So that might not satisfy him wanting access to attention. Okay, so it's important to see how, okay, he wants access to attention. Giving him his tablet, that's not going to get him the attention that he wants. He's still going to be attention seeking. Okay. So, okay, again, antecedent modifications. Okay, so we're going to talk about antecedent modifications. Okay, so there's lots of antecedent modifications, and antecedent modifications are often like your best approach, or it's like the front line to minimizing challenging behaviors. Why is this? Okay, well, the behavior hasn't occurred yet. So if you can set up and arrange the variables so that the behavior doesn't even occur, then you're winning. Okay, so you don't really want to get to the having to give a negative consequence. You want to reduce the likelihood that a negative consequence has to occur, and that the only consequence will be reinforcement. Okay. So what does this look like? Okay, so for example, sensory modifications. Okay, so in the example of automatic reinforcement, which the behavior is occurring because there's some sort of kind of sensory satisfaction that the person is getting by engaging in the behavior. So a sensory modification could look like, okay, so let's say, the child engages in like humming or grunting, and it can be disruptive. Well, they could want some sort of auditory stimulation that they're not getting. Okay. So what would this look like for an antecedent modification? Okay, so maybe you give them access to some sort of auditory stimuli like music, or an instrument, a piano, you know what I mean, like a little kid piano, um, conversation, right? So that goes into replacement behavior. So if they're engaging in like, guttural noises or squeaking noises, teaching them to use their words functionally, that could also be some sort of antecedent modification. Okay. Um, Other sensory modifications could be, like, let's say for skin picking, sometimes what we would do in, ABA is you could put glue. You could start with putting glue on their finger, so they pick the glue off their finger instead of picking skin. Okay. You can shape this by, at some point, instead of putting the glue on their finger, putting the glue on a piece of paper and teaching them to pick the glue off of the piece of paper. Okay. These are antecedent modifications that could reduce the likelihood that they'll engage in the problem behavior. But again, like, the function of the behavior was sensory. So you want to make sure that the antecedent modification and the replacement behavior has to do with the same sensory stimulation that they're receiving from the challenging behavior. Okay. So that's why the glue sort of feels like skin picking, and it could satisfy their desire to want to have that feeling of like picking. Okay. Um, Right. So, in terms of self injurious behavior, I'm not going to get too much into that. If you do have a child that's engaging in self injurious behavior, that definitely requires professional assessment. Please contact me or an ABA agency and really kind of get into what you can do to intervene on that kind of behavior. All right, so we're going to move on to other antecedent modifications. We have priming and rule governed behavior. Okay, so a lot of times a child will engage in challenging behavior because we as adults, we have our own schedule of things, and sometimes it can be a little bit abrupt and it can be jarring to a child or a young person or even to our partner, right? You know, get up and take the trash out, and it's just like, oh my god, what? Right? So it's important that we prime the young person or whoever that this is what the expectation is. Okay, so for a young person, let's say it's Saturday morning, you've told them, oh, we're going to go to grandma's house in a little bit, and they're playing, with their toys. They didn't really hear you say that you're going to grandma's house. So an example of priming would be, okay, so you go into your child's room, you get down on their level, and you let them know, hey, we're going to grandma's house today. So I'm going to give you a little while to play with your toys. And then we're going to get washed up, and we're going to get dressed, and we're going to have something to eat, and we're going to get going to grandma's house. Okay. And then they say, okay. Okay. So that's an example of like letting them know beforehand, face to face, eye contact, getting on their level, stopping them playing from their toys for a minute, right? So that they're really listening. This can greatly reduce challenging behaviors, especially for young children. Just letting them know what the plan is. Okay. And letting them know what the plan is, like each step of the way. Okay. First, you're going to play. Then we're going to get washed up and get dressed. Then we're going to have breakfast, right? So it's like you're letting them know what exactly is going to happen. So that way, when you come in and you're like, all right, let's get washed up, it's not going to be like, oh my God, no, right? So, you, you know, this really goes a long way, and this is for really children of any age. So for example, in my own life, okay, my son
Are you
is
done yelling?
No, I'm having a live right now, honey. Sorry, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. I'll try to talk quieter. um So my son is in the marching band and he has a game tonight that he's going to be performing in. And, we want our daughter to go with us. So we let her know last night, like, hey, the expectation is that you're going to be coming to the game. She was like, no, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. And we're like, hey, this is the first game. This is a big deal for him. We just want you to go to this game. You don't have to go to other games, just this one. Okay. So by letting her know in advance last night, today, when we expect, things to kind of run smoothly to get ready to go to the game, we're not going to be met with a whole lot of resistance because, again, priming. I can't stress enough how important priming is. Even with your partner, you know what I mean? Even with your friends, even with, your coworkers, like, you have to let your boss know when you're going on vacation. That's an example of priming, right? You can't just be like, "Oh, I'm going on vacation." Like, no, you have to like put in the time that you're taking off and stuff like that. So an extension of priming is rule governed behavior. Okay. So rule governed behavior is sort of like grandma's rule: if this, then that. Okay. So, if you do this, then you get that. You know, it's important to know if your child does understand rules and can follow, a rule governed behavior. So, if your child is too young or if they're developmentally not cognitively able to understand rules and how to, like, to follow through with rules, um, you're going to have to kind of do something a little bit different, which is, excuse me, more focus on the consequences. So for example, like in the store where the child wanted candy, if a child is able to be rule governed, you could say, okay, so the rule is, no issues in the grocery store. You can pick out one thing and then you can have that thing on the way home. Okay. And so that's the rule, right? Um, but for a child who doesn't follow rule governed behavior, um, you could use a visual. So a visual might say, like the visual might show, like, first the grocery store and then candy, right? So and then they'll basically take off the grocery store and then they get the candy and then they can take off the picture of the candy, right? So you may have to kind of alter how you uh you know display or how you express what the rule is, um depending on the child's level of cognitive development. um Another antecedent modification you can do is giving choices. Do not underestimate giving choices. Choices are a really big deal, and just kind of giving the child control. Because if you think about child development, um, you know, as children grow and develop, there's a certain level of independence that they want, and then they kind of regress, and they want to know that that there's boundaries, that they're safe, that you're ready to catch them if they fall. Okay, so a good example of this would be when a child is learning to walk. They'll go, and then they might look back at you. Okay. When they look back, that's them kind of checking in, like, am I okay? Is everything okay? Am I doing good? Right. And you're like, yeah. In order for your child to grow and develop, you can't just hold their hand for their whole entire life. Like, you have to allow them to leave you and to learn how to walk on their own. And that's just like a very small, discrete example of how growth and development works with children, but this continues throughout their life. Like, I don't know when this cycle of, you know, go, 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 and then looking back, am I doing good? I don't know exactly when that ends, right? Because for example, like me starting my business, um, that's going out on my own, right? That's learning how to walk by starting my own business, right? I'm learning how to walk in my own way, in terms of, being able to generate income on my own, being able to support myself. And, you know, I do want to receive, like, you're doing a good job, great job, like, so you still want that even as a grown adult. Um, so again, back to kind of giving choices. It's important that you're not constantly choosing for your child, constantly making the choices for your child. This is a great way to minimize challenging behaviors. So for an example, let's say your child doesn't want to eat certain foods or doesn't want to eat what you're making them. um, this could be a control issue, really. Like, this could be you're telling them constantly what they should be eating. And think about a child. So like, your child goes from being a toddler to being a preschooler, and you as a parent, you're like, ever since you were a baby, I've been making your choices for you. But at some point, the child wants to make their own choices. Okay, they want to pick out what they want to wear, and this is where you could meet resistance again with putting on clothes, with eating, with brushing teeth. So if it's constantly like, do this, do that, wear this, wear that, this, eat that, you're constantly telling them what they need to do, when they need to do it. And the challenging behavior might be occurring because they want some control. They want to be able to make some choices. They don't always want you telling them what to do. So obviously you would minimize this by giving them choices of what to wear. Okay, that's a very simple fix. Do you want to wear these pants or do you want to wear this dress? Do you want to, have bananas or do you want to have peaches, right? Um, or if you want to work on communication skills, you might be like, what fruits do you want to eat, so that they tell you, right? Then they practice, using their communication skills. So this is an example of giving choices. For older kids, an example of giving choices would be, allowing them to, pick out the clothes that they're buying, right? Allowing them, um, you know, I mean, if they have a device, like, both my kids have phones and have, access to screens and that kind of thing. So I feel like they're already making a lot of choices in terms of like the media that they consume. So at some point, the choices kind of feel like they are kind of getting out of control in this day and age, like in 2022. But I mean, that's a conversation for a different time. But my point is that, um, you would still want to give them the opportunity to make choices. So maybe you give them, an opportunity to make choices for like family decisions. Like, so for example, when looking for a home or looking for a place to live, maybe they come with you and decide like, okay, do they like this house? Do they like the apartment? Or picking a pet, or, going grocery shopping. They contribute to the grocery list, right? Or they even help go grocery shopping. Um, yeah. So this is an example of how, you allow them to have greater choices or choices that impact the whole family as they get older. Okay. Um, Another antecedent modification that you can make is enriching the environment. And I think along with, oh yeah, so enriching the environment, you know, sometimes challenging behaviors might occur because there's too much in the environment, so it's overwhelming. So this is where an antecedent modification for a child who has too many toys might be to put some toys away, actually. Okay. So, if your child ends up just making a huge mess, or is not actually playing with toys but is maybe being destructive, it could be that you just put some toys in a bin, put the bin away, and then cycle the toys out, right? Or switch them out every now and then. Okay. um but yeah, just kind of like making sure that there's stuff for them to do. Your home shouldn't be a museum, and it should definitely be a place that is a place for the child to explore, to be curious. So um if they like playing with the remote, you could even give them a dummy remote, right? Or maybe they just like buttons and things, finding a toy that has lots of buttons. um yeah, so making sure. And then this also includes like when you're going out places, like if you're going to temple or church, making sure that they have something to play with. Now, obviously, everybody has a device when they go out, so like even babies like are on tablets. So that's an example of enriching the environment, and making sure that they have something that's going to kind of stimulate them and occupy them. I mean, I think to an extent we have replaced toys with tablets and things, but I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. um, Establishing rapport. This is a really good antecedent modification. So this has to do with being fun and being reinforcing yourself. Okay, so this is for parents, grandparents, caregivers, babysitters, teachers, anybody who is interfacing with a child or a young person, um, or really anybody. Just like being a person who is welcoming and pleasant, and you know your ability to kind of tune into what the person likes is important here. Okay. So this isn't about being fun the way you want to be fun. This is about being fun the way the other person wants you to be fun. Okay, so if you want a child who is amenable to your various demands and schedules that you want to put them on, then, this will be easier. They will be more acquiescent if you are somebody that they know that they're going to get kind of like a reinforcing interaction from. Okay, so I mean, an easy example of this is just being a parent who is attentive and who pays attention to their child. And I know that this kind of sounds hokey, or you know, this might sound obvious, but it in our culture where you always like I always see parents just kind of like on their phones like this, you know what I mean? Like at a restaurant, like I'll see, a child just sitting there and the parents are on the phone like this. Um, that's not a great way to build rapport with your child. Um, you know, Interacting, giving them attention, letting them know that they matter and that you care about the things that they care about. This is important. Okay. This is building a relationship with your child. Okay. And having them like you. Okay. So if this is important to you, having your child like you, then, let them know that you like them. Um, be fun, get down and play, tickle, make jokes, as they get older, just like ask them about their day, ask them about, like, oh, so, what are you learning? Oh, how did that math test go? Oh, I saw this article and I thought of you. Oh, did you see that thing that happened in Costa Rica, with the alligators? I don't know. I'm just talking nonsense. But, you know, so as they get older, you might talk about like current events or funny things that you saw or things going on in their lives. Um, you know, when they're younger, it's kind of like, just a little bit different. Again, it's more about like, you know, um, being silly, being funny, getting down on the ground and playing with them. Okay, so obviously it's going to look different depending on the age of the child and depending on the cognitive development of the child. But there's always a way to build rapport. Regardless of where the child is at developmentally, regardless of the age. There's always a way to, if you have an adult child, you could take them on vacation. You can take them to get their nails done, take them bowling or mini golfing or to get boba, or just go hiking. You know what I mean? Like the list doesn't end of things that you can do, even having dinner at night. That's why they say it's important to have dinner with your children, because that's a time, just like, hey, the expectation is that we're a family, we get together, this is a time for us to ask each other questions. And that's not to say that it's always going to be pleasant. Like, honestly, I have a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old, and the last couple of years, it's definitely not always been like the best dinner, um because teenagers are difficult, and um so sometimes there's tension, or somebody's annoyed, and you still, as the parent, just try to be pleasant, try not to take anything personally. And this has been like a learning process for me, so I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, I've done everything right and I do everything perfectly. Like, no, this has been a learning experience for me for how to continue to build rapport with my teenagers. But it's something that I'm still working on because it's important to me to have good rapport with my children. Okay, so routines and schedules. So, routines and schedules kind of is similar to priming, but it's more like a consistent thing that you do rather than, oh, we're going to grandma's house today. Okay, so routines also help the child understand kind of what the daily and weekly expectations are. Um, you get up, you brush your teeth, you get dressed, you wash your face, you know what I mean? At night, you take a shower, clean up your room, read, go to sleep, right? So, like, establishing routines will help minimize difficulty when it comes to what the expectations are. And this has definitely been something that has been challenging as my children get older, because, they want to do things their way. It's a little bit easier now with my 16-year-old because, we were, you just kind of like when they get to be like 12, 13, it's like, they don't want to shower as much. Well, now Bella's coming out of that and she's actually much better about, just showering. But, if the expectation is like, okay, so, every night is a bath or every other night is a bath, um, rather than like who knows when there's a bath, or there's a bath in the morning, sometimes there's a bath at night, or you're all over the place with it. That's when you can kind of see issues. Okay, so again, depending on the cognitive development of the child, you know if there are more significant challenges, a visual schedule can be really helpful. So, pictures of what each thing is. And then, again, from there, depending on where they're at, they could move it to like they're done, right? So, for example, you might have like, a picture of brushing teeth, um, going in the bathroom, washing face, getting dressed, having breakfast, and then going off to school. So that could be like the morning routine. And so they bring each picture over to the all done column once they've finished with their routine. That could help a child who has more significant challenges kind of get on track in the morning. Okay. And that's again an example of establishing a routine, having a schedule, which could again minimize challenging behaviors. Okay, so that's it for the antecedent modifications. So, replacement behaviors. Replacement behaviors look like, again, the function. They should match the function of the behavior. Okay, so for example, if a child is engaging in problem behaviors, either for anything, but let's say access and escape, functional communication could be the best way to deal with these challenging behaviors. So having them verbally say, like, I want such and such, or, I don't want, or I need help, right? So teaching them how to functionally communicate. If the child is nonverbal, you can use pictures. There's also, electronic communication um, tools that you can use, like Proloquo to Go and Touch Chat. There's other ones. Um, so this is kind of really important for access and escape, and even attention. Like, mommy, play with me, right? But again, it's important that if your child is actually saying to you, I want to play with you, you can't be the not right now mom all the time, right? Like, you do want to reinforce um, the verbal request for your attention before they start engaging in challenging behaviors to get your attention, right? Because if you're always the not right now, mommy's busy, then that's when you might start see the challenging behaviors occur, because when they asked you for attention, you weren't available. Now they need to get your attention other ways. Okay, so this is important to note for attention. Okay, so for automatic reinforcement and sensory stimulation. So, for example, let's say, you know, there's a lot of like hand flapping or rocking like this. So, physical stimming behaviors, self-stimulatory behaviors. This fly is really driving me nuts, and I'm trying to be calm about it, but it's bothering me. Um, Right. So think about the release of energy through exercise or giving them sensory breaks. Okay. So, this could look like, having a dance party, right? So, you can have them request, you know, I want to take a break or I need a sensory break. But if they are not verbal, or if this is just something that you want to build into their schedule, you could say maybe like every half an hour, again depending on how much they engage in the challenging behaviors. And that's why it's kind of important to get an assessment, because a professional behavior analyst can help you figure out, how often to implement the intervention. So, how often to have them engage in these replacement behaviors, depending on how often they engage in the challenging behavior. Um, so have them engage in sensory breaks. That could be using a yoga ball, that could be using a squishy ball, that could be using slime, that could be, you know, what else? I said dancing, um, any, like, what is it called? Jumping, what's it called? Like a, oh my gosh, what is that thing that kids jump on? Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Um, right. So, there are tons of different sensory outlets, or tools or activities, toys, that somebody might use for sensory stimulation, programming that into their day so that they are getting the sensory stimulation that they need without engaging in challenging behaviors. um, this is something that is great to implement, for those who are seeking sensory stimulation. um, okay, so we're going to move on to consequence modifications. So consequence modifications are like reinforcement, extinction, and punishment. Okay, so that's the behavior analytic, uh conceptually systematic, right? So these are the uh things, or these are the you know consequences that will let them know, this is okay, this is not okay, or you're withholding reinforcement. Okay, so for reinforcement, when you are um, doing an antecedent modification and teaching a replacement behavior, and you see a reduction in the challenging behavior, and you see an increase in them engaging in the replacement behavior, it is so important that you reinforce them. Okay, you know what I mean? So in the example of we're going to grandma's house, okay, you primed, you let him know what the routine was, you let her know what the routine was going to be. I used a boy last time, so I want to use a girl in this example. Okay, so let's say Daria. Okay, so you let Daria know, okay, this is what's happening, blah 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 blah, and Daria, stops playing when you ask her to, goes to brush her teeth when you ask her to, gets dressed when you ask her to, and gets breakfast and gets into the car to go to grandma's house, all without any issues. Okay, so you really need to make sure that you're remembering to provide praise, and even if you can, a little extra something to let her know, hey, great job, Daria, that's exactly what what the expected behavior was, and this is awesome, right? So you really need to remember to kind of reinforce appropriate behaviors, so that you know first of all, that you're acknowledging that they did the right thing. Okay, acknowledgement is a big thing. I mean, for a lot of us, like, we just want to be acknowledged, we just want to be seen, we want to be appreciated. This is like human nature. Okay, so for a person of any age, really, it's important to let them know, like, hey, like, I appreciate you, this is great, you're doing great. So yeah, reinforcement can be, in the form of praise, depending on, you know, how big the task was. So in the example of Xavier and the math worksheet, let's say your antecedent modifications are working. He's not engaging on challenging behaviors when he receives a math sheet. You're not having to kick him out of the class and send him to the principal's office. It's really important that appropriate reinforcement, so praise might not be enough, right? So yeah, part of the reinforcement is that, he escapes having to do the whole entire math worksheet, right? So let's say at this point you've modified it so that he only has to do half the problems, um, and you say, good job, but maybe a little extra reinforcement, like maybe, with each correct math problem, he gets a gold sticker, and then at the end of the week with 5 gold stickers, he gets to choose something from the prize bucket. Okay. Um, you know, Making sure that, because you really want to show like you really appreciate him not being disruptive. You really appreciate that he's, working hard um to do his math worksheet. And so again, like praise is great, but that might not necessarily match the effort that he's putting in, right? So you really want to make sure that your reinforcement is matching the level of effort that the person is putting in. Okay. So another consequence modification could be extinction. So in the example of Xavier having outbursts, for attention. So let's say you put in the antecedent modification where rule governed behavior. So like if you can get through the whole lesson, you get a gold star. Um, and then at the end of the day, you get to kind of like have a little conversation club with a few of the friends that you really like or something. Okay. So let's say that's great, but and the behavior has definitely decreased, but occasionally there will be outbursts. So at this point, instead of punishing him by sending him out of the class, it could be that you ignore him, okay, and that you ask the other kids to ignore him. Like, oh, we're not going to respond to Xavier, or so just kind of making it clear that the attention that he received is being withheld, that he's no longer going to receive attention for engaging in disruptive behavior. So extinction is basically just withholding the reinforcement that was previously given. Okay, so that's an example of attention. So an example of access give extinction as a consequence for a child trying to get access to something. um like let's say the preschooler in the grocery store is trying to get candy, and they have a tantrum. You just ignore the tantrum, like, and they don't get access to the candy. And that's extinction. There's no punishment, there's no reinforcement. You're just withholding, you're withholding the reinforcement because maybe before you actually did give in and give the candy. And now, nope, not doing that anymore. And so oftentimes extinction will help decrease challenging behavior, just withholding the reinforcement. With my 13-year-old, you know, sometimes she'll just like do inappropriate things or say inappropriate things, just like being annoying. I don't know. It's probably just, a 13-year-old type of thing, just to kind of like, get a rise out of us. And sometimes I'll respond just like, cause we're kind of like going back and forth and being funny with each other. But occasionally I just ignore it, rather than being like, Bella, stop, like, don't do that. And trust me, I still do the Bella, stop, don't do that. But, sometimes it's just easier to ignore it, and she stops, right? So that's extinction. Okay. And then for punishment, Punishment in the field of behavior analysis is, ethically, you want to use reinforcement and extinction first. Okay, so punishment is the last ditch effort, and punishment could look like, for a young child, timeout. Okay, so that's probably the most common form of punishment. Um, so punishment really is, um, anything that would decrease the behavior. Okay, so you know, positive punishment is adding something to decrease the behavior, and negative punishment is removing something to decrease the behavior. Um, so an example of positive punishment would be, like spanking, which is not recommended, and I do not recommend spanking. And I have definitely, as a BCBA, tried to ensure that parents have the tools that they don't need to engage in that kind of level of intervention, because there's a lot of other things that you can do. So that's an example of positive punishment. Um, and time out is really negative punishment. So, like, it's removing something. So you might be removing the child from, they're playing with their toys, they're watching TV, they're playing with their friends, whatever it is. You're giving them time away, right? So they don't have access to the things that they want, to think about how to engage in appropriate behavior, right? Once they get back to the things that they want. Okay. So again, um, timeout, is not something that should be used just kind of like willy nilly. You don't want to overuse timeout. Really, it's kind of like for more egregious, more serious, challenging behaviors. So yeah. And if you have any questions about, how or when to use timeout, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to, assist you in whatever situation you're going through, right? Where you feel like, timeout would be appropriate. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for that. And I wanted to open the floor for anybody who wanted to ask questions, or if you had a story or a situation that you wanted to share. So please feel free to let me know down in the comments, or you can email me directly. I have my email in the description, or I'll put my email in the description if you'd like to reach out to me. And thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you were able to get something beneficial from it. Um, you know, Parenting, caregiving, it's not easy. We're not given like a rule book. And a lot of times we're running off of how we were raised, and how we were conditioned to be caregivers, and it might not be the most constructive or productive way of being a caregiver or parent. So it's important that we learn you know positive ways to kind of shape the behaviors that we want to see in our children, right? So just be easy on yourself, give yourself grace. None of us are perfect. And just know that, there is help out there. There are ways to reduce challenging behaviors without too much strife or too much headache. So I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.